I am going to dive in. I have Chris. If you see the name Chris Rembold in there, that's my husband. He's also the developer who's worked on most of the tools in the Color Palette Studio. We love Chris. He fixes our bugs. He creates new tools for us. And he helps with the webinars. So he is going to be answering questions in the chat box. I have my eye on the chat as well. So if I see something that needs my attention, I'll try to answer it. But I'm going to be working through, like breezing through this workshop. So Chris is going to be your go-to. Let's dive in. We're going to let more people join, but I'm going to dive in because there's a lot to get through. In the chat box, can you put where you're calling from? I would love to know. Where are you in the world? I know we are spread so far and wide. Illinois, I can't even read all these. Argentina, Singapore, Slovenia, Italy. Oh my goodness. This is just so magical. I love that we were all able to connect, whether it's morning or evening. I think for some of you, it might be the middle of the night. And I just like cannot believe that you would stay up to watch this. I love this community. I'm so grateful for it. I love that we can just nerd out about color and graphic design and bring some light and sunshine to this space. We all know that there are corners of the internet that can feel a little dark and murky. And I love so much that we as a community make this space feel fun. And I hope to continue to do that because this can be fun. This can be very, very fun. So I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. My name is Sam. I'm the founder of the Color Palette Studio. And I am a graphic designer and color palette expert. I started as a jack of all trades graphic designer. And then I found that I really wanted to focus on one particular subject, which was color palettes. So that's what I do now. I've expanded slightly from color palettes into fonts and brand guidelines, but essentially I stay in this corner of the world. I create tools and resources to help designers and brands create better color palettes. Now, I want to start this off by sort of describing who this workshop is for so that you don't feel like you're wasting your time. This is for designers, so graphic designers, brand designers, web designers, social media designers. It's also for business owners and brand managers. Truthfully, if you touched branding in any way, you're going to get something super valuable out of this workshop. So if you're here, if you saw the sign up page and you felt like it called to you, you're probably in the right place. Another note is that this will be recorded and I'll send out the slides later. I am almost positive it's recording right now. I got a notification that it is. So if it's not, I'll re-record it for you, but this is going to be recorded. All this should be, and I'm going to send out the slides. So don't worry if you missed something. There is so much information in this presentation. So I would really, I don't want to spend too much time going over the tedious details, but you're going to have this presentation to look over later, which I'm a visual learner, so that would probably be very helpful. The video recording will be sent out. It takes like a couple hours to process, but it'll come out in like a couple hours. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to talk about what are brand guidelines? Like, what are they? And next, we're going to cover why they matter, because we can't talk about what they are without discussing also why they're so important. And I have some great examples. We're also going to talk about what you should include in your brand guidelines because they're super important. And it's just as important to think about what not to include as it is to think about what you should include. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to create brand guidelines in a way that doesn't take forever. When I originally wrote this presentation, I wrote how to create brand guidelines in a way that doesn't suck. But I decided to change it because they shouldn't take forever. It should not be a painful process. It should not be awful. You should enjoy it. And it should be a great way to wrap the gift of the branding that you've created and send it off into the world. So what even are brand guidelines? What are they? Before we talk about what they are, we're going to unpack two terms. The terms are brand elements and brand guidelines, because these are two separate things that sometimes get confused for being the same thing. Brand elements are the components that make up a brand's identity, like its logo, its fonts, its color palette, its imagery, its messaging. These are like the actual elements that go into a brand. So here are some examples of brand elements from a brand that I created years ago. So we've got like certain style of collage imagery, this nice serif font, this sans serif font, this color palette, this fun tiger that I really loved at the time. But brand guidelines are different than brand elements. Brand guidelines are a set of rules that explain how a brand's elements should be used to ensure consistency and recognition. So brand elements are how they're used. I'm sorry, brand elements are what's being used, and brand guidelines are how they're being used. So here's an example of the brand guidelines that I created for that brand. So these are like the rules and regulations for how to use the brand elements. And an easy way to remember this is that brand elements, you can think of like ingredients. So I'm a big baker. I love to bake. And I think of brand elements like the ingredients for baking. So your eggs, your flour, your sugar, your butter. Can't do anything without butter. So yes, Chris does get a lot of my cookies. So these are your brand elements. But if you're a baker or if you've dabbled in this world, you know that if you're given these ingredients, you can make a lot of different things with those same ingredients, like with butter, sugar, flour, eggs. You can make cookies, you can make cupcakes, you can make a German chocolate cake, you can make brownies, and you can make different categories of things within each of those. So you can make like buttercream, you can make chocolate. So there's just so much that you can make with the same ingredients. But brand guidelines are like the recipe for how to use those ingredients. So think of your brand guidelines as the recipe to your favorite carrot cake. No matter where you are or what sort of access to ingredients you have, like whether you have carrots from California or carrots from the UK, you're probably going to be able to make a very similar style carrot cake if you have the brand guidelines to make it. But like, why does this matter? Like, why does this matter? Is this just all fluff that we're talking about? No, it matters. And I have an example that maybe felt therapeutic for me. So let's pretend that these are the brand guidelines that someone uses. Someone just kind of like DIY'd their branding and they put together a simple doc that are like, okay, here are the fonts we're going to use and here are the colors we're going to use, whether a designer gave this to them or they did it themselves. So here are the fonts and here are the colors. That's the brand guidelines that they're working with. No, no. I said, oh no, things can go so wrong so fast. Does not work. Because here's the designer's vision. When the designer created these brand guidelines, we'll call them, the designer's vision looked like this. This is what they thought this business would look like. It's called Cosmic Cupcakes. It's this fun cupcake store. This website is beautiful. It's easy to use. It looks gorgeous, right? It's super fun. But this is what the client did in real life. With these guidelines, with these rules that they were given, this is what they did. If you're a designer, maybe this hurts you a little bit. If you're like, oh, what's wrong with this? I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I will show you what's wrong with this. Don't you worry. I'm seeing some designers feeling very painful right now. Okay. So what went wrong? We're going to talk about it and we're not going to bully anyone. This is a made up example. You can bully me if you want. This was my thing. But I want to talk, I've seen variations of this happen time and time again. So I wanted to, I love how much of a nerve this struck because it also strikes me. So what went wrong? First of all, the graphic designer wanted smooth background gradients. That's what they designed. But the client went with stark, solid backgrounds. They use the same colors, but they use them the wrong way. The designer, when it edited photos or thought of photos for this brand, used bright, saturated filters on photos. They pumped up the colors. Everything's bright, juicy, super saturated. But the client went with like a retro muted filter, which made the food actually look like super unappetizing. Yeah, it's just a filter, but doesn't it change how much you want to eat this cupcake? Like I would so much rather eat that one. The designer went with correct spacing and capitalization on text. So like Cosmic Cupcakes is written as it normally would be. But the client decided to add one of my favorite spicy things, which is a little bit of spacing between script letters or tracking. It's a little painful. It's hard to read. And there's mismatched caps. Like you can see in Just Launch, we're going with like a 2006 AIM vibe here. Maybe that'll come back, who knows? But the designer went with high contrast color pairings, very pretty and accessible. And the client went with very low contrast color pairings. Even on your screen, this might be really hard to read. Like there's blue text here on a light pink background. It's nearly impossible to read. Not enough contrast makes it almost impossible to read. But the client did nothing wrong. Like, yes, it's funny to joke about it, but like they actually did nothing wrong. They followed their brand guidelines. It's just that the guidelines weren't clear enough. I'm so sorry to stress you out. If you need to take a deep breath, you can. It's going to be okay. We're going to help prevent things like this from happening. And that's why I'm hosting this workshop. I have actually been the client and the designer. I think that things can just be better for everyone. Years ago, I had a business where I hosted virtual mixology classes, and I had a whole team. We had a pretty big business, and we would work with teams like Apple, Google. I'm not going to be like the name dropping person, but we worked with a lot of big tech companies to do their work from home team building events. And business was booming. And I was like, oh, we need like a legit website. So I hired a brand agency to design my brand and website and spent about $15,000. They did an amazing job. I've also had clients pay me $15,000 or more to create their brand and website. I discovered a love for graphic design after I worked with a designer and I started my own agency. So I have done both things. I have worn both hats. But I think being on both sides of things helped me realize some of the holes in the industry and how things can be better. So I'm going to tell you some of the problems I've noticed in the industry, and you might relate to some of these. Problem number one is too much fluff. I noticed this when I was the client, and I am not trying to badmouth my designer at all. I actually really liked my designer, and I wouldn't say there was an obscene amount of fluff in my guidelines, but I think it's really, really easy for designers to add too much information to their brand guidelines. These are things like 40 plus page PDFs that you send off to your client. It has way too much information. And it takes forever for a client to find the information that they actually need. So, like, if they want to know the color of the light blue in their palette, they have to scroll like 26 pages deep into their brand guidelines to find that. That's really painful. And I do want to say, too, if you're a designer, and also throw a one in the chat if you're a designer of any kind. I think that if you're a designer, it's really, really easy, especially if it's like a high ticket project. Like if you're paid thousands of dollars for a brand project, it's easy to think that you have to provide this like fluffy, gorgeous brand guidelines document to your client at the end to almost like justify your rate. And I just don't think you need to do that. I think that usable guidelines is better than fluffy guidelines. The opposite problem in this industry is the lack of clarity. So, this is when some guidelines don't have enough info, like we saw in the example with the cupcakes. They're just very bare bones, not clear enough. It's so important to not only include the what, which are the brand elements, your logos, your colors, all that, but also the how they should be used. Problem number three is that the guidelines can actually be hard to find. A super long PDF looks amazing upon delivery. Like I remember getting my brand guidelines as a client and being like, "Oh my God, they're so pretty. I just want to look at them." Like, and I paid so much money for them. So like I love them and I want to frame them. But actually my process for finding them was anytime I wanted to find them, I would just eat or like look up in my inbox the name of my designer, scroll through all my emails till I found the one where I got my brand guidelines. And it was just like, oh, this isn't like the best process for me. It's hard to find them. Also, logos, fonts, color codes, things like this can be really hard to locate for daily use. So if they're hard to find, then they're going to be hard to use and then they're not going to get used. Another problem is that brand guidelines can be very time consuming to create. And I'm more talking about the designer's perspective here. I used to work in VIP days a lot where clients would hire me for like a 1 to 2 full day VIP day where I would do all their branding. And it would take me an additional day or two to actually build the brand guidelines, which I found ridiculous because I had just done all this creative work and it took me the same amount of time to package up my creative work as it did to create the creative work. And that just felt so wrong. Like I did not want my creative energy to be going to something kind of boring, honestly. And I think that most templates out there can be very rigid and fixed. So I have bought a lot of brand guideline templates out there, and some of them I really loved. But the problem I found was that if I like had a brand color palette that had 7 colors, but the template was created for like 5 colors, it just like was really hard, and I ended up doing a lot of designing to fix it on my own. So let's spend some time learning about brand guidelines and how we can make the whole process better for everyone in the future, better for designers, better for clients. Okay, so here are my like overarching tips for creating really good brand guidelines. Include the what and the how. So obviously include the brand elements, the fonts, colors, logos, all that, but you should also include how those elements should be used. Another thing to keep in mind is accessibility. And you've heard me talk about this before if you've come to a workshop. Always make sure that you check your color pairings and fonts for accessibility before building your guidelines. Especially if you're a designer, you're likely going to be a lot more educated on this than your clients. And so it's a good thing to check because your clients might not know how. Another thing to do or to keep in mind is that usable guidelines are the most valuable. So usability outweighs fluff every single time. The brand guideline should be easy and clear and easy to follow. Don't include fluff just to prove value. And I just want you to like trust yourself that the creative work that you did is valuable enough and that you don't have to like fluff up your guidelines to justify your creative value. You're valuable and what you did mattered. We're going to have a quick chat about accessibility because I can't have a workshop without doing that. At the end of the day, accessibility really means contrast, which is the difference between background colors and text colors. So if you look on the two options on the right of your screen, option 1 is really hard to read because that light pink text is so much or so similar to the light pink background, whereas brown text, much darker, much different than light pink, and that is high contrast. If you need help, I have a free contrast checker. You can use that here. Chris can also drop the link in the chat if you want to check it out. It's free, super accessible, and you can check any color pairings. And if you want to learn more about accessibility, you can go to the WCAG. This is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. This is an amazing site with a ton of information about how to create accessible websites, brands, apps, all that. They know a lot more. And there are also some really great creators in this space that share a lot more information about accessibility. Oh, and the score that you're looking for color contrast is 4.5 or higher. Thank you for reminding me. You want 4.5 or higher. This would be like a 1, and this would probably be like, I don't know, an 8 or a 9. Okay, so now we're going to talk about brand guideline elements. This is what to include in brand guidelines and easy to understand lingo because I did not go to design school. Some of you might be like, yeah, that's clear. No, I just, I didn't go to it. I found my love for design only 3 years ago. Like 3 years ago this month, actually, I started playing around on YouTube tutorials and learning graphic design. I'm completely self-taught. I have like a lowbrow approach to this world because when I see something I like or when I create something I like, I know I like it and I don't need to like have a super highbrow education to understand why I like it. So I'm going to give it to you in like plain understandable English. We are going to cover 4 main categories today: logos, color palettes, fonts, and some bonus things that you can include in your guidelines. I'm going to warn you right now, I'm going to go fast because there is a ton of stuff to go through. Do not feel like you have to absorb it all. And there's going to be a lot of like nitty gritty details that I wrote up that I just do not have time to go over. So these PDFs are going to be really great for you to review later. So if it feels like I'm going fast, I am. I'm a fast talker. First, we're going to talk about logos. Now, a logo is just a symbol used to identify and promote a brand. So think like the McDonald's logo. You know it when you see it. Every brand needs to have a unique logo and even better, some sort of variations. I recommend including the following elements in your brand guidelines: the logo variations, the logo usage rules, and formats. So variations are different versions of a similar logo. So they're like cousins, but not twins. I've only heard that actually used about eyebrows, but it makes sense for logos. So let's pretend that this is a brand, Local Honey Studio. There are a couple different variations you can use: primary, horizontal, square, and favicon or favicon. So your primary logo is like the main one that you think of when you think of that brand. The horizontal logo is great if you have very limited vertical space. So think like your website header. If you just have a very squished amount of vertical space, it's good to have something that can go wide. A square version, I include like half the time. That's either something that's square or round that just can go in a perfectly square space, has equal vertical and horizontal spacing. And then a favicon or brand stamp. I don't know. Do you say favicon? Favicon? This is a good thing to have, especially for like actually using in your favicon space in your website. Essentially, when your logo has to get squished down to like a centimeter by a centimeter big, it's really important to have something that like is clearly associated with your brand. And this would be really hard to read at a very squished space. Now, sometimes you want to include proper rules for how to use the logo. So this is usually a list of like what not to do, like don't do this. Other times you can just say, don't mess with the logos I made. I've done that before, and I think that that's sometimes the easiest thing to do. Here are some common ways that people say like, hey, don't mess with your logo. Don't alter the colors. Don't use any colors that aren't in your brand color palette. Don't scale things the way that they aren't supposed to be scaled. Like this text is supposed to be much smaller than the honey text. Don't decrease quality. I think this is one of the most common ones I see. And this has a lot to do with like educating people on which files to use. But yeah, keep the quality high. I designed it high. Let's keep it high. Can you tell them? I'm a defensive designer. And then finally, improper sizing. So like, don't use logos that are meant to have a ton of space vertically in a space where they're going to be really, really squished. Yeah, favicon. Also like GIF or GIF, Abby, I feel the same way, or niche or niche. I'm like, I'll just throw both out because they're kind of the same. Okay. Now we're going to talk about logo formats. This is something that, you know, I don't know how to say this. It matters for sure, but you don't need to understand all the nitty-gritty details of it to understand like what you need to include. So here are some common logo formats: PNG, JPEG, SVG, and PDF. I could spend a lot of time explaining like the logistics of how these are different, but the overarching thing is that these two, PNG and JPEG, those are images. So if the logo is like a rainbow color, you can't edit it. It is going to look like a rainbow color and it might have like a transparent background, but it's always going to be what you deliver. And SVG is what's called a vector. So that means that it is scalable at different sizes. You can make it the size of a billboard, or you can make it the size of a centimeter. And you can change the colors most of the time, as long as it was designed that way. So if it's green and you want it to be blue, you can change it. So I love the flexibility of SVGs. PDFs are really loved by the printing community. I think that's all you need to know about these. I like to include at least 3 of those categories. If I'm going to leave one out, it would be the PDF. And now we're going to talk about logo storage. So like, where do the logos actually live? Do you host them in Dropbox or in Notion, or do you deliver a zip drive? It's really your choice. And these are some of the more common places to like store your logos. You can store them in Dropbox, Notion, Google Drive, or you could just create a zip drive and export them that way and just send over a file. They're all pretty similar. It's just like choose your fighter, which one you like the most. I'm going to share a little bit of information about how to sort your files. This is my process. Yours might look a little different, but the way that I sort my logo so that clients have an easy way to find the logo that they're looking for is I sort by file type. So like SVG, PNG, JPEG, and then I give them different variations. So like primary, horizontal, favicon, and then I give them different colors within those. Now, I don't always give them all of the colors. It really just depends on the project, but it is nice for them to have the options. What I do is I create a Notion database with all the logo files linked in Dropbox. So I have a database that they can access, and I'm going to show you later, so that they can like save it to their browser and access everything in their brand really easily. But I have the logos uploaded in Dropbox because that just works for me. I like Dropbox. Also, just something that I do is I will have the client add me to their Canva or send me their login, and I will upload the SVG version of their logos directly onto their brand account. And I'll also add their fonts and colors. So I'll complete their brand kit. I just find that clients use Canva a lot, and it's great for them to have everything up there because they might not actually like take the time to upload everything. And it takes me 5 minutes, and it just gives them a little extra ammo to follow their brand guidelines. Yeah, I love doing it. It takes 5 minutes, and it's like such a nice, juicy thing to deliver at the end of a project. Now we're going to talk about color palettes. Oh, you come to the right place. So your brand color palette is a carefully curated selection of colors that are meant to be used for your brand. If you want to have like the easiest way to stay consistent with your brand guidelines, it's just using your color palette consistently. Think of like iconic brands that have just stayed so loyal to their colors, like McDonald's, UPS, Subway. Like, you probably think of their colors before you think of anything else. Here are some things that you want to include in your brand guidelines. And some of these I think are really easy to like forget about. You want to include color previews, color codes, color names, formula, high contrast pairs, and transparency levels. I'm going to go through all this. So when I say color preview, what I'm talking about is actually like what the color looks like. It sounds silly, but you need to show people actual colors that you're referring to. If you give them the hex code for a color, like most often, that's not going to mean anything to them unless they're an extremely nerdy designer. But for most people, like this hex code is just kind of nonsense. So tell or show them what color you're referring to. Next, you want to give them color codes. We can quantify colors into different categories of codes, and you want to give them as many codes as possible. I'm not going to get too nerdy here, but there are 3 main categories of color codes. We've got hex codes, which is a 6-digit code used a lot for web and digital design. It looks something like this. This is probably the one you're most familiar with. And then we have RGB. This is measuring ranges of red, green, and blue from 255 or levels of 0 to 255. It looks like this. This is more commonly used for web design. And then we have CMYK. This is really loved by the printing community. And it's represented by percentages of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Next, you want to give them color names. So this is how you actually refer to the colors in a color palette. This is important for you as the designer, as well as the client or whoever's using the colors, because sometimes you're just going to have to reference the colors. So like, let's take this pink. Here are some ways that you can name this color. Like there's no one perfect way. You can do a bunch of different things. You could just call it pink, like keep it literal. No one's going to get mad at you. No one's going to say you're not creative if you just call it pink. Like that's totally fine. You could call it bubblegum. You could have fun with it. You could call it cotton candy. Or you could call it rom-com. You could match the branding. I designed the branding for Beach Reads and Bubbly, if anyone's familiar with that. It's like a book reviewer of Beach Reads rom-com style books. And so we had fun with her colors and we matched the branding. So you can do that too if it feels right. Next, oh, this is fun. I think you're going to really like this part. We're going to talk about color roles and formulas. So this is how you actually use the colors in your brand color palette. Is one of the colors a hero? Is it like the main character? We're going to talk about this. So there are 4 different color roles that you can think of. There's the hero color. This is the primary color of the brand, the most dominant and frequently used. So like for McDonald's, at least in the States, it's red and yellow. Those are both hero colors. Like when you think of the brand, you think of those colors. Then you have accent colors. These are used to highlight important information and just kind of add a little bit of extra spice to the brand. Then you've got variant colors. Sometimes these are variations of the hero color. So it's just like a different version. And then you've got neutral colors. These are your boring colors that you just need to include. So these are shades of white, gray, beige, brown, or black. You need to have at least 1 light neutral and 1 dark neutral in your color palette. These just help balance your palette and make everything feel really good. Like I have a very colorful brand and you'll see I use black and white all the time. And that's why everything is so easy to read. Now we're going to talk about how you assign which colors are which, because this is so important to think about. And I noticed that a lot of people were just not putting as much intention behind this. And it doesn't feel good as a client if you don't fully know how to use your colors. So I made some color formulas that I hope are helpful to you. There are 3 formulas. The first one is called the hero formula. This is when you choose one single color to be the hero color. This is like unmistakably identified with your brand. So like Starbucks uses one hero color. They use that iconic Starbucks green, but their palette's actually pretty big. They have a lot of colors in their palette. They've got a lot of variations of that hero color and they've got some neutrals, but they have one hero. And if you want to remember the hero color formula, I recommend thinking of the TV show Fleabag. Fleabag has like one main character. If Fleabag were to like not be on the show for a season, it would feel so weird and it would be like a little bit unfamiliar. So the hero formula, if it were a TV show, would be the show Fleabag. Drop a 2 if you've watched Fleabag. I'm curious if anyone's watched it. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the second formula, which is dynamic duo. This is when there are 2 hero colors. These colors are often used together to represent the brand. So like McDonald's is a dynamic duo brand. Dunkin' Donuts is also a dynamic duo brand. They use their iconic orange and pink, and then they've got some neutrals to balance out their palette. Here's why this formula is so important. If a coffee shop were to open up across the street from Dunkin' Donuts and they use like bright orange in their branding, they probably like wouldn't be confused with Dunkin' Donuts. Like it's not that big of a deal. But if they used bright orange and bright pink in their branding, that would be super confusing. So that's how you can know what's a hero color and what's maybe like an accent color, if it's like really the main part of the brand. If the dynamic duo was a TV show, it would be Key and Peele. Like if one of them were to exit the show, it just would not be the same. It would feel so wonky. So when you think of the show Key and Peele, think of the dynamic duo color palette. Thank you. I used to use bands. Okay, no, I'm going to be real with you guys for a second. I used to use bands, and the hero was Beyonce, and the dynamic duo was Dan and Shay. But I think they split up, and I had a really hard time finding a dynamic duo band that was like still together. If you can think of one, let me know, because I had a really hard time thinking of like a musical duo that's still together, because so often they split up and do their own things. Keenan and Kel, that's good. But I mean, is it supposed to be Keenan and Kel? Keenan's Tegan and Sarah? Okay, see, I was struggling, so I went with TV shows. Okay, the last formula is iconic family. This is when there are 3 or more colors that represent your brand. So think of Google. Google does a really great job of this no matter what product or something that they launch. They tend to use the same 4 colors: Google Blue, red, yellow, and green. And they're always used together. So they rarely launch a product. I don't think they've ever launched one that's like entirely blue. They all tend to use like their full palette. That's how they represent their brand. If the iconic family formula was a TV show, it would be Friends. It's really about the sum of the parts and like all of them working together, which is why most storylines in Friends have at least something for all of the characters. I hope that that was helpful to you. The 3 formulas are hero color, dynamic duo, and iconic family. Now, remember that palette that I showed you at the beginning of this session, that green and blue palette? We could go with a hero color formula and we could have like a bright green as our hero color, and then everything else could be an accent or a neutral. Or we could go with that green and that blue as both being hero colors and making it a dynamic duo formula, and then having everything else be an accent or neutral. So there's no one perfect fit. You can make one palette work a ton of different ways just by assigning different roles to the colors. So your role is to assign color roles, either hero, accent, or neutral. And then you want to choose a formula for your color palette. So is it a hero? Is it a dynamic duo? Or is it an iconic family? And I'm so curious, if you run your own business or if you have your own branding, what formula do you think you use? Like right now, are you like a hero? Are you a dynamic duo? Or are you an iconic family? I'm really curious. Hero, dynamic duo, tons of dynamic duos. Wow, that's so cool. This is really interesting. I would have not guessed that, but I love that. Dynamic duos. Okay. Okay, so next we want to show our clients some approved pairings. So we want to show them how to properly use their brand colors. And you can use our tools like our free contrast checker or use the color palette tester to find approved pairings. This is where we are looking for pairs that have a contrast score of 4.5 or higher. I use the color palette tester, I think, to get these. And I know that like, while I love this green and this blue, if I were to use them together, it has a really low contrast score. So I would maybe want to use the green and that navy together. Sometimes in your brand guidelines, you might want to show clients what not to do, just to be very, very clear, or you might want to just show them what you recommend doing. And I found, since I started doing this, I love including the contrast score and taking a little bit of time to educate my clients about why it's so important. I think that they take it a little bit more seriously and they feel very excited and empowered to like use it properly. Because if you're just playing with colors and you're not really familiar with the design world, it's so easy to accidentally combine colors that shouldn't be combined, and you just don't know any better. And so when we take that little bit of time to like share the contrast score and show them why it's so important, I think it makes it a little bit better. Sometimes I like to include a color range, totally optional, but it just gives everyone a little bit more options to work with. So I will scale the colors at 100%, 75, 50, and 25% transparency, just to show them the different levels that they can use in their palette. Okay, now we're going to talk about fonts, something I love almost as much as color palettes, maybe just as much, who knows. Brand fonts are the specific fonts that you've chosen to represent your brand's voice and style in written content. And in the chat, can you put what font you're loving right now? Like, do you have a favorite font these days? I'm always looking to add new fonts to my library, even though my accountant says, no, stop. But I would love to know what fonts you're loving. Okay, so here are some font pieces or information about brand fonts that you want to include in your brand guidelines. You've got your font family, category, preview, usage details, and hierarchy. And I'm going to go through all of these. The font family is the name of the actual typeface. So like when people ask what font is that, this is the answer. So everything that you guys are putting in the chat right now, that's the font family. Like Seasons, Perfectly 90s, that is the font family. You don't have to get too detailed about these styles, but and just give the name of the font. So like, here's Perfectly 90s. That's what that looks like. Here's Tequila Sunrise. So this is the font family. Next, you want to assign a font category. So this is how the font will actually be used. And the 4 main categories are heading, subheading, accent, and body. You do not need to use all of these categories. I recommend using at least 2. So here's sort of what that can look like. Your heading font is like the main font for the brand. So when people think of your brand, they think of this font. This is what you would use for like headings or titles. Your subheading font complements that heading font and helps you organize information. So for my presentation, like this would be my heading font, and then this is where my subheading font would be. They happen to be the same, but if I wanted to use a different font here, I could. Your accent font is like a distinctive, fun personality font. It's like the personality hire for your brand. So this can be fun. Sometimes they're handwritten, sometimes they're a little goofy. You use these for very small bits of text to just add some fun and flair. And then your body font is like your most straightforward, readable, most simple font. This should be simple. It should be boring. I will say that forever. Your body font does not need to be extroverted. It should be very chill. And a good way to tell the difference between a heading font and a body font is to just think of SNL. I'm never not thinking of SNL. So your heading font is like the host for the week. So Pedro Pascal would be your heading font. Your body font is like the background actors in a sketch. So when you're thinking of the sketches on Monday morning, you're thinking mostly of like the host. You're not really thinking of background actors number 2 and 3. So, so you want to keep your body fonts and keep your background actors minimal and forgettable. Your body font should never, ever, ever look like this. It should be very calm and simple. Next, I think it's really important to show what the font actually looks like. I know this is silly and like might be so basic, but if you just tell someone like perfectly 90s, unless they're a designer, they're not going to understand what that means. So show them what the letters look like. This is so helpful for clients to understand how to use their fonts. And then you're going to want to include usage details. So how to use the font. And this is the thing that I think gets skipped very often, but when there were all of those errors with the website with the cupcakes, a lot of those errors came from these usage details. So we want to give them information about the font weight, how thick the font should be. Should it be thin? Should it be regular weight? Or should it be bold? You can actually tell them which one to use. Font style. This could be something like any style effect on the font. So is the font italic? Is it regular style or is it condensed? If you don't say, they might freestyle and that might not be good. Letter spacing. And this is the amount of space between each letter. So do we want like low letter spacing where everything's squished together? Do we want regular or do we want high? For body fonts, I would never mess with this, but sometimes you might mess with this for like a subheading font. For line height, again, body fonts never mess with this. This is the space between lines of text. So low, meaning we squish them together, regular or high. I almost always keep the letter spacing and the line height as it comes. Text case. This is one that gets skipped, but is so important. This is like whether the font is lowercase, uppercase, or normal case, meaning like as it comes. So you can have a font that's all lowercase, like Ariana Grande's song titles years ago. I think she used to do this. You could do normal case or you could do all uppercase. Font hierarchy or sentence case. Thank you. Font hierarchy is including a preview of what the fonts actually should look like. So like, how should they look compared to one another? Because like if we made this subheading font giant and then the heading font really small, that would technically be following the rules, but it just would look really wonky. So I like to include a few slides about how the font hierarchy should look. Okay, and then here are some optional bonuses. Oh, we are doing so good on time. Okay, so here are some things that you can also include in your brand guidelines. Things like call to action styles, patterns, icons or illustrations. I'll take this slow actually because I have a little extra time. So call to action styles are like buttons. What do the buttons actually look like? This is something that's really easy to skip, but if you don't call it out, like people can freestyle with buttons and you can just take a minute to like describe how you want the buttons to look, what colors you want them to have, what fonts you want them to have. What do they do when they're hovered? That's so good. Include patterns. If you've created a custom pattern or if you have a texture or something that you use for the brand, you can include that. Illustrations and icons. So like if you've created some custom icons for the brand, you can include those. You can also include general illustration style. So like what if you use hollowed out black and white icons, or you can do like hand drawn pastel vectors or something, or like cowboy illustrations, like whatever the style is, you want to include that because like a pin drop icon can look a lot of different ways. The imagery style. This is going back to that cupcake image. You know, do you edit your images or do you edit your videos to be super bright, bold, and saturated? Or do you edit them to be more black and white and neutral? So you can call out how you want the images or the videos to be edited. Like I have a very colorful brand, so I tend to pump up the colors, but some people might want something a little more neutral and minimal. So call it out, because if the colors and the images don't match the vibe of the brand, it can look really wonky. You can also call out the voice and tone. So like, what's the voice that the brand uses? Is it like irreverent, or is it super respectful? Is it silly, or is it serious? Like, how do you write captions? How do you write your brand copy? You can include all that in your brand guidelines. Mockups. These are things like social media mockups, website mockups. How does the brand look when it's being used in real life? I love to include just like a website homepage mockup, even if it's just the hero section, just to give my clients an idea of what to expect their website could look like. I'm not maybe the website designer for every project, but just giving them an idea of what the elements could look like on a website with one of their images is really fun. Gradients. If the brand uses any gradients, include not only what the gradients should look like, but also the hex codes for the gradients and the angle, because like a gradient that's 90 degrees is different than a gradient that's 35 degrees. That might be wrong. And then email signature, show them what their email signature could look like. I found that this is like one of the smallest ways to just delight a client is just to prepare a little email signature for them, because they're going to want it. They're going to want a fancy, cute little email signature. So that's a really easy thing to make. I also made you a free little template. So you can use the QR code, or Chris can paste a link in. This is a free Canva template that you can use to create a one-page brand guideline doc. Now, this does not have everything that we covered. Okay, this is a very basic version, but sometimes it's really nice to be able to have just a one-sheet brand guideline to include with your fancier brand guidelines, because you might want to make something that's like a nice long juicy doc with all the rules, but then clients might just want to have a one-pager to have access to. Someone asked if I give them their email signature as an image or house it on a website. So I use Google Docs to make them, and I make the image their favicon, or like one of their logos, and then I make everything else text. That way it's copy and pastable, and that way like e-readers and things can use it. Yeah, so I make it in Google Docs. Super easy, makes it more accessible. My tips for creating brand guidelines, again, include the what and the how. Make sure that everything is accessible, and make sure that your brand guidelines are actually usable so that people like enjoy using them and follow them in a way that feels easy to understand, which sometimes includes using language that's easy to understand, because like a non-designer might be a little thrown by tracking, but something like letter spacing might be a little easier for them to understand. So I tend to use like client-friendly language. Now, a lot of you probably came to this workshop because you're like, okay, but how do you actually create brand guidelines in under an hour? Under an hour is a pretty quick turnaround. And I'm curious, how long on average does it take you to create brand guidelines? Like if you're creating them for a client and you've finished everything, you've made the logos, you've chosen the fonts, you've made the colors. How long does it take you to turn around brand guidelines? Okay, a week. That's a lot of life. A week, few days, 4 to 6 hours, a million hours. Friends, I wish I would have asked you this in the beginning. Oh my goodness. I just want to give you all a hug. You have so much life to live. Like there's so much out there to do. And that's a lot of life to give to. We all need like a lot of hugs. Okay. I was at about a day. I'm a fast worker, but it was about a day for me. So here's what I do, because I just have better things to do than spend all my time tweaking brand guidelines, especially for every project, because this is something that I'm going to be doing a lot. So I've made a system, and I recommend that you create a system that works for you. So my system might not be for you, but I'm going to show you my system because you're here and you probably want to learn. So the system I use is I have a 1 hour checklist that I follow. So I have just a simple checklist, which I'm going to send you later. I'll show it to you. But it's just something that I go through and I make sure I don't forget anything. And I just don't lose any sleep because I'm like, oh, I followed everything in my checklist. I don't need to overthink it. I also put everything together in a Notion brand kit. So I use Notion to hold all the brand elements. And it's just so easy for me to have everything in one space. And then I use a tool called the Brand Guideline Builder, which you guys are going to be the first ones to see. So the 1 hour checklist is just my very, very simple Notion checklist that I use to follow or to build my brand guidelines. So it literally has everything. I'm actually going to show it to you real quick. So this is my brand guideline checklist, and I just have it give me notes for everything I need to do. So like the logo files, what variations I need to include, what formats I need to include. I also have maybe optional like upsells or upgrades I'm going to do, color palettes, fonts, brand guidelines. And then I also have bonus guidelines checklists. So like if I'm doing their call to action styles, their patterns, their icons, I have all of that in here. Also, I forgot I gave this to you guys. So there is this template, which you will get for free because you're getting the checklist for email signatures. So randomly years ago, I posted a video on TikTok about how to make an email signature, and it just went like the most viral I think something possibly could. This is what it was. I haven't changed this in 2 years, and this is just a very simple template for making an email signature. That's not what we're here to talk about today, but you're going to get that for free. Okay. So, another thing that I do is I put everything together in a Notion portal, which I'll show you in a second. But the crown jewel of what I do is the brand guideline builder. So the brand guideline builder is something that I made for myself that I've been using for a while. And I was like, I think that the design community would probably benefit from this because we don't need to be spending a week building brand guidelines. This is an all-in-one template system for creating ready-to-use brand guidelines, and you can do this in 60 minutes or less. I'm going to show you how it works, but just know, in case you're like, oh my gosh, I need this, anyone who's in this workshop is going to be able to save $25 in the next 48 hours, and Chris can drop the link for the brand guideline builder in here, but you can use code HAPPYGuidelines to get that discount, and also there are some bundles and the discount stack. So let me show you the brand guideline builder because it is so much fun and it's just so magical. Okay, so here's how it works. We've got your brand guideline builder here. And there are all these different templates that make up the builder. And I'm actually going to stick this in here so that I can work hands-free. Okay. So we've got your brand guideline templates and then mix and match page templates. I'm going to show you how these things work together because it's so fun. And I just can't believe that this like was not a thing before. Okay, here it is. On the left side of your screen are your brand guidelines. So this is like where everything is going to go. And then on the right side of your screen are your page templates. So you can edit these. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to turn this color palette into brand guidelines in like a minute. So I'm going to keep this color palette open on the left side of my screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the eyedropper tool on the page templates, and I'm going to add this color, and then I'm going to click change all, and it's going to change the color on all the pages in my page templates. So I'm not going to make you watch me do all of these, but it's truly magical because now in just a few clicks, all of the colors on this doc, let me scroll down, like these all got updated. And you can do the same for the color codes. So we can use this find and replace feature, and we're going to click find, and then we're going to copy this color name, and then we're going to replace it with pastel purple, and then we're going to click replace all, and it's going to replace that across all pages in this doc. Then we can click copy on the hex code. Copy this, and we can actually copy the hex code for this color and paste that in. So we can repeat that for the RGB and the CMYK colors. So it's like truly magic. I'll show you like why it's so magical in a second. But then another thing we can do is we can update the fonts in just like one click. We can change the heading font to our actual heading font. So for this brand, maybe we want to use Louise Display Italic as the heading. And so we're going to click that and click change all, and it's going to update all the fonts. We can also maybe edit the accent font to be something like our accent font, and then click change all. And then we can update the font names. So we can click heading font, and we can hit that find. Oops, sorry. Okay, so we can hit that find and replace the heading font with Louise Display, and then click replace all. Okay, so here's why I didn't want to make you watch me do all of that, but here's one that I did earlier where I actually replaced everything. And here's what that looks like. After you do those few minutes of edits, you have all of these pages with edited colors and fonts. So if you want to, you've got your color formulas already edited. You've got your your palettes created. So here's how it actually works. Okay, so we're going to build these brand guidelines together. I'm actually going to scroll up to the top and go to the page menu. So I'm going to go to the page that I want to edit, which in this case is the color palette. So I want to edit the color palette. And here I've got information about the color palette, like what this is, and usage guidelines. So I'm going to click color palettes, and then I'm going to select my palette size, which in this case is 7 colors. And then I have all of these templates that I can use. And look at all the color names and codes have been updated for me. So like if I really like the way that this one looks, or maybe a different one, maybe I like this one, I can select this and paste it in, and it's going to be perfectly formatted so that it just goes where it's supposed to go. That's the magic of it. And then I can go down to color codes, and I can go to the color codes page. And then I can say, okay, I have 7 colors in my palette. And then I can go to the color codes page and copy that and paste that in. And so it's just like magical. It's so much fun. I truly think that this whole process can be a lot easier if we're not just copying and pasting our whole lives away and like tweaking everything and making everything like super complicated. It also has a ton of information about color formulas. So it has information about like what the different color formulas are. And like, let's say I know I want to use a dynamic duo formula for this brand. I can scroll down. The swatches are going to be right here in case I need to reference a color. And I can choose like any version of the dynamic duo that I want. I can tweak them if I want to. Oops, I forgot. I'm actually going to copy all of this and add that in here. So then the client knows the brand has 2 main hero colors. Super, super fun. Yes. Okay. So this is sort of how it goes. There are also approved pairings. I don't want to make you watch too much of this. I want to make sure that I have time to answer any questions you need, but like for color range, I can just go to the palette size 7. There's also a bonus expansion pack. So there are all these bonus templates because I included in the brand guidelines templates, like the average pages that you would need. So like places to add your logos, places to add your color palettes, your formulas, your color range, brand fonts, font hierarchies, call to actions. But then there are also these bonus templates. So if you want to maybe add in patterns or illustrations or icons, and just like even having the copy in here so that you don't need to think about like what to say, it's just preloaded so that you can export it and hand it over to a client. I also have these bonus pages included in the page templates and the mix and match page templates. So you have things like pattern examples, icons and illustrations, imagery style. I really like this one. Like for imagery style, you can say like, oh, okay, I want the imagery style to be somewhere between neutral and serious. And I want the colors to be maybe a little bit more muted. And I want the subject to be more for people. So this is just like a really great visual way to show people how to use images for their brands or use their brand tone or voice. I thought of everything because I want everything. I like a lot of options. My favorite book when I was a kid was the Curious George book, where he went to the ice cream store and he got one of every scoop. Like that's just so me. So I wanted you to have a ton of options. I wanted you to have mock-up options for social media or a website, gradient examples. There's just so much in here. There's 167 pages of templates that you can choose from. And the best part is that you can literally just copy them and paste them. So if I wanted to just add buttons to the brand guidelines, I can do that. Then once everything is all done and I've like added all my pages, I can update the brand guidelines in literally seconds to make them match the branding. So I can change the color of the backgrounds. I can change the font and make everything just perfectly match the brand. Super, super fast. So then what do I do when I'm all done? I don't want to make you watch me do all of them because it takes me like 20 minutes to do all this. But when you're all done, you can put it all together in a Notion template, which I include in the brand guideline builder. So if you get the brand guideline builder, you get this template as well. This is what I use to deliver my clients' brand guides. So I have like a quick intro of everything they need. Sometimes I'll include a little video, and then I actually add their full brand guidelines right here. So anytime they need to access their brand guidelines, they're like one click away. They have the full guidelines right here. And then I sort everything below into the categories that they might need. So I have their logos. So they have a Dropbox folder for their SVGs, a Dropbox for their PNGs, and a Dropbox for their JPEGs. I also include the Color Buddy Chrome extension. So this is, you saw me using this earlier. This is the free Chrome extension that Chris and I made. This allows you to have all of your brand colors, including hex codes, RGB, and CMYK colors right here, one click away, and your favorite high contrast pairings. So I'll give them the link so that they can just get the free extension and add their link and have that like right there. And I also give them their color codes. So they have their color codes all right here, which I literally just copy and paste from this because Canva copy and paste works in Notion. So I just copy that and add it here. So they have their color codes one click away. I also include links to their fonts because this is something I find all the time. Like if a client wants to get a font, they don't know where to go to get it. So I give them links and I give them recommended font licenses. And then I might include any bonuses like an email signature or something like that. So yes, I put everything together in the checklist and then I follow my checklist. I use the brand guideline builder and then I upload everything into this Notion brand kit. And then I click share and publish it and turn it into a URL and just send that to them. And what I recommend that they do is they pin it to their browser. So then they have their brand guidelines literally one click away. They're always just right there in their browser. It took forever. I actually I think I injured my wrist from all the copying and pasting I did to build this tool, but it was like preventative for future me and hopefully for future you because it can be easy. Like it is allowed to be easy to create brand guidelines. And I wanted this to be a system of templates that you could use. So you can even make your own template pages. Like if you want, let me actually just show you what I would do because this is possible. So if you are like, if you want, you can make a page where you have your own custom like things over here and you can add in like a button style or something that you do, or if you have a certain way you like to deliver patterns, like you can use this as the base foundation to make your own system. And you don't even need my tool to create brand guidelines that look and feel amazing. This is just going to save you so much time. So my advice is to create a system that works for you. I recommend making yourself a checklist or using the free one that I'm going to send you later just to know what to follow. And then I recommend having everything in a Notion portal. Megan, yes, you can share that code. Thank you for asking. I recommend having a Notion portal so that you keep everything in one place when you share it with your clients. Even if you don't use Notion portal, maybe you use another software or service, but keep everything in one place. That way, when your client wants to know what fonts they want to use or what color codes they need to use, they don't have to jump to a bunch of places. One home base is just so wonderful for everyone. And then I recommend having a template for building your brand guidelines. You do not need to do these from scratch every time. You can use my template, you can use another template, but finding a template system that works for you is just going to save you so much time. And also templates tend to tell you, like at least my template tells you what you need to include and why it's important and how it should be used. So it's like taking homework from you and it's taking guesswork out of it from your client. Okay. How did we do on time? I was so worried. Oh my goodness. Okay, what questions do you have? We did it. I'm so happy that we got through all this information and that we got to like fully nerd out. What videos or tutorials did you learn to self-design? I tended to like when I needed to learn something, I would look it up. So it would be like how to turn a PNG into an SVG. Like I would just Google problems that I was facing. I will say that as a designer, I found that the best thing I could have done was design in public and learn in public. So I did a little 30-day challenge on TikTok where I said, I'm gonna design a brand every day for 30 days and I'm gonna share it on here. And some of them were not good, but some of them were. And people started to ask me to redesign their brands. And so I would just pick one every day, design it in public and post about it. And so I think like the act of designing and sharing what I was designing was like so helpful to learn how to be a designer. Do the hex codes auto-populate in the table? Yes, they do, Laura. They absolutely do, and it's magical. How do you prefer to share all the hex codes for an entire color range? Oh, okay. I would use the Color Buddy for that. Can you teach? Do I do one-on-one? I don't do one-on-ones anymore, but the iconic family is essentially when you choose 3, 4, or 5 hero colors. So Google's one, Monday.com is one. Really, if a brand uses a collection of colors regularly together, they're going to be an iconic family. Oh, my TikTok is right here. So if you want to follow me on socials, on Instagram, on TikTok, or get the brand guideline builder, you can do that here. Design classes aren't software focused, they're conception focused. Yeah, that's a really great point, JC. And I would say that like conception was something that I had to learn. I also read a ton of books. So this entire shelf here is design books. And so that's been really helpful. And the library has a ton of design books. So I would recommend going to your local library or like local used bookstore and just getting some design books and flipping through them and seeing what inspires you. Because like what design style you naturally gravitate towards is probably going to be where you shine. Like I love bright, bold, colorful stuff. So that's where I'm really good. But certain designers like niche down in different design styles. Oh my gosh. Yes, all the links will be in the email as well. I'm going to package the recording and all of these links for the free goodies and the free tools on my site. This is the best design training. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Naomi. Oh, I'm so grateful that you guys enjoyed this. Learning to design logos, I literally just I practiced. I asked people if like I publicly was like, hey, if you want me to design your brand, I'll give it a shot. And then I just did it. And I used Adobe Illustrator, Figma, and Canva. So I'm a big fan of using all the tools in your belt. I use different tools for different things. I tend to use Adobe products for creating logos. I use Figma for designing websites, and I use Canva for pretty much everything else. We need a book list. I'll have to put one together. That's a great idea. Yes, Charlie, we will. Yeah, we try to add the codes to the chat, but it's like so much happens so fast, so it can be hard. Okay, let me know if you have any other questions. I'm also curious, like, how did you feel about this webinar? I'm going to send out a survey later so you can give me your real thoughts. You can make it anonymous if you need to, but I just want to say a giant thank you. Whoa, 82 new messages. Oh my goodness. I just want to say an enormous thank you to everyone who just carved out time in your day to attend this workshop. I have been working nonstop on this for the last like 9 days, and I've found true joy in this. I feel like I had the most fun job ever. I get to pick a topic and really nerd out about it. And something that I forgot to mention before is that I crowdsource topics for these workshops. And last time I asked this community what you wanted to learn about, you said style guides, brand guidelines. And I have waited to do this workshop until I felt like I could bring something unique to it. And so I wanted to make sure that I had like tested everything and really found a way to hopefully lift things up for this entire community. Even if you just take away the fact that your brand guidelines should not take forever to create and that usability is better than fluffy, too fancy guidelines. I hope that you just got some value out of this workshop. I was so focused on making sure that you got something valuable because I know how important your time is. And I'm just so grateful that you spend your time with me. Okay. I'm going to let you all go enjoy your days. Thank you. Anyone who attended this workshop or who bought a tool or who has bought a tool, you have supported me and Chris and just given me the most fun job. I cannot wait to keep learning about these topics, distilling what I think is best, for everyone to know, and then sharing what I find. And thank you, Chris, for running the chat and for building our tools and making our lives a lot easier. Thank you, everyone. You guys have a great day. I appreciate you so much. Deep breath. We did it.